Welcome back to Business Talk here on Business Tech, South Africa's #1 business news website. And time to talk about health and to take the health of one of South Africa's leading medical schemes. And we know health inflation, lifestyle diseases, a sluggish economy. South Africans really are being squeezed from all sides. But even in this environment, medical schemes have to find a way to deliver real value while remaining financially sustainable. The Medshield Medical Scheme has just announced a 7.5% weighted average contribution increase for next year, with new benefits and a renewed focus on prevention rather than cure. I'm joined now by Aron, Principal Officer at Medshield, to unpack how the scheme is managing to achieve all of this. Kevin, great to have you back on Business Talk. And we know that Medshield's tagline is partner for life, and it suggests something that is a deep kind of continuous relationship rather than something that's transactional. How does this philosophy actually translate into the way that you've designed your benefit options for next year?
Hi, Michael. Yes, and again, thank you for the privilege and the opportunity for being on your show. Medical schemes face a massive challenge. They work on the basis of cross-subsidization, where the young and healthy are meant and intended to subsidize the older and less healthy, the richer people then cross-subsidize the poorer people. You're not allowed to have anti-selection. That's how a medical scheme works in theory. But to make it work, to be sustainable, you need to have the elements of being able to attract young people into your scheme. And, what we try to do, and why we've got the tagline partner for life, is really that, we want to bring people that, are just entering in the formal sort of job market, starting to earn some money. They're young, they're healthy, unlikely to end up in hospital. We want to bring them into Medshield, typically on the lower cost options because of affordability. And then we want to, through delivering great service, great value, we want them to be part of our family. And we hope that as they get older, they stay on Medshield. As they start to make more money, as their life changes, they get married, now they have children, their needs, their health needs change, and Medshield wants to adapt to be part of that change. So our options are structured in a way that follows the life stage of a person, in terms of offering more benefits as you need them. Eventually, you get to a point like sort of retirement where you need more comprehensive benefits. But the challenge that we face is to make that work. You've got to be able to attract the young people, and that's the challenge that medical schemes have. And it's really because the Council for Medical Schemes, for whatever reason, just will not approve low-cost benefit options. So when I look at Medshield, we are the open scheme that's got the highest solvency in the market. We're financially really strong. But when I look at the average age of members on our scheme, I'd love it to be far younger. I'd love to be attracting the 21, 22, 23-year-olds in droves. But those people are still gravitating to health insurance plans because you can get them for 300 Rand a month. And because of the restrictions with PMBs and the legislation that we have on a medical scheme, it becomes very hard to match that from a financial perspective. So we're doing well and we're doing the best we can, and we certainly are attracting young people. But if the playing fields were leveled and we were allowed to compete by having these low-cost benefit options, we would definitely attract significantly more younger people into the scheme. All schemes would have that opportunity, and that would really contribute a lot more to the sustainability, but also the contribution increases that members face. We launched very competitive contribution increases for 2026. 72% of our members will not have more than a 7% increase. But if we had the ability to really attract young people in by competing with the health insurance plans, you may well find that we could go to market with a 4% contribution increase. So, it is a struggle, but hopefully at some point something will happen.
And one really has to ask questions of the council the minister, anyone involved who is ensuring that there's this uneven Freudian slip there, uneven playing field when you look at the way medical schemes can compete against other insurance providers who are not straitjacketed by the Act. But coming back to your increase, I mean, to say that 72% see a 7% hike, it's certainly below the industry trend, still slightly above CPI. So maybe you could just walk us through how you balance that actuarial prudence with affordability in this environment where we still see medical inflation often running in double digits when it comes to inflation.
Yeah, Michael, Medshield is a very prudent scheme. We don't gamble. We don't gamble with our members' funds. So, we do intensive actuarial calculations. We contract independent actuaries to do the pricing. And we don't manipulate the contribution increase. We're in a very fortunate position that we've got such a high solvency. We've also had a very good year. Last year, we made a surplus. We've seen consistent membership growth over the last 2 years. And, for 2025, we've had 8 months out of 9, we've had net membership growth. So we're in a very fortunate position that financially we're really strong. We've just had an upgrade from global credit ratings from AA- to AA. So that gives us a buffer. It gives us a bit of a leeway that when the actuaries come along, we can actually price competitively because we don't have to price for increasing our reserves or our solvency because our solvency is so high as it is. And I suppose, we're very lucky at the moment. It doesn't mean it's going to be like that all the time. I think we've been very successful in attracting young and healthy people into the scheme. And that provides a very good balance in terms of their claims ratios against maybe some older people who are sicker. And it's allowed us, obviously, to go to market with genuine contribution increases that are not artificial and are not going to result in, the following year having to catch up and suddenly have a 12 or 14%. So we've been very lucky because of our financial strength. But we obviously manage the scheme very carefully, very tightly. And our members it seems that our members are very respectful to the scheme and don't abuse the contributions and the reserves that they're putting in. So I suppose you could just say we're very fortunate to be in such a strong financial position.
And, that obviously comes with that prudence and consistency that you mentioned. And it's one thing I think that Medshield stands out for is that you smooth the increases. So as an investor, it's almost like being in a smooth fund where when the market rallies, you may not have all of the upside, but when the market crashes, you certainly don't have all of the downside. And it helps you as a member, I think, just plan and budget and understand what you're going to be paying from one year to the next. And I recall a conversation that we had in the past where you're contracting, for example, with specialists to help bring some of those costs down. So maybe you could just take us behind the scenes and from an operational perspective, explain how you do this. How are you managing to offer this value while still keeping increases well below what medical inflation is running at? Is it new technology that you're adopting? Are you managing those hospital costs pressures better? How are you managing all of this?
Yeah, it's a combination of issues built into a strategy. We focus very heavily on what we call strategic purchasing, which is the contracting with, in particular, hospital groups. Last year, we went out on tender. We used the tender process as an opportunity to negotiate lower tariffs, higher discounts. We're seeing the benefits come through. You're correct in saying as well, we introduced a specialist network. We're still growing that network, and we will probably only really see and reap the benefits of the specialist network probably towards the end of 2026, 27, when we get to the level of scale that we want. But the specialist network has been growing incredibly quickly. We work very carefully with our partners on the managed care side, looking at high costs, how we can actually intervene, where we can actually address the savings. We're very focused on the forensic side. We use a specialized company that specializes in healthcare forensics and fraud, waste, and abuse. So it's a combination. And I think we've also developed very good relationships with our brokers. We have very supportive brokers. They understand what is required for the sustainability of a medical scheme, and they've really worked with the scheme in terms of bringing good risk onto the scheme. It doesn't help anybody. If you bring somebody, for example, who's 85 years old, they got 4 chronic conditions, and you put them onto the lowest cost option. Eventually that person finds that they need benefits that the option doesn't actually give them. So we've worked very carefully and very closely with our brokers to get them to understand this concept of sustainability and also the different life stages that people go through and which options actually fit to what life stage. And we're actually finding that they're working with us in a very productive and constructive way. And that obviously all of this contributes to the sustainability of the scheme. It doesn't mean that you can't have a bad year. But again, as I said earlier, we are very fortunate with such a high solvency that we can buffer. We can buffer any storm that comes. But, we obviously continue looking at long-term sustainability. We're looking at, in particular, the corporate market. How does Medshield evolve itself and elevate its status so that it can become a scheme of choice for corporates, for companies? That's probably our number one focus at the moment, is penetrating the corporate market. We're also using and looking at a lot of health technology in terms of how we can be more efficient. We're a self-administered scheme, so we don't have a profit motive. There's no margin because we're self-administered. And we are utilizing hyper-automation, robotics, artificial intelligence to help us predict the onset of disease quicker, that we can actually engage with the patients quicker before they get into trouble and end up in hospital. And then from an operational perspective, using robotics, using machine learning, using artificial intelligence to make our processes more efficient, to standardize them, and to automate them. These are all the things we're looking at, reducing our non-healthcare costs. And all of this then contributes to being able to obviously go to market with more competitive products and also a more competitive pricing.
Yeah, and I see, and you mentioned it, the ability to predict ahead of time, this prediction and prevention. And they often say prevention is better than cure. So if you can detect things earlier, it just makes a whole lot more sense for the member, for the scheme overall. All of the members of the scheme benefit. And I see you've included the likes of diabetic, retinal screening, and continuous glucose monitoring up to the age of 18. You've got annual mammograms from age 30. So take me into this prevention strategy that you've launched this year as well.
Yeah, it's a multi sort of focus approach. So, I mean, the type of stuff that you've mentioned is directly in benefit design, where we've looked at things like eye tests, the mammograms, where, most medical schemes have a 24-month cycle. It just didn't make sense to us. So, we reduced it to a 12-month cycle. We pay it out of risk. So members don't have to carry the cost of these screenings. And all of these screenings assist people. The introduction of the AI diabetic test to check for I've now gone completely blank, for diabetes, which you can do through the retinal scanning. Obviously the mammogram, it actually saves lives if you can pick it up. So we've started on things like direct benefits, and then indirectly we've introduced technology into the scheme, which looks at big data. It looks at patients who are admitted into hospital. It can predict with a very high certainty the likelihood that certain patients, based on their conditions, their age, the type of procedure, they may actually be readmitted. So those are the patients we focus on. We monitor them. We call them every day. All of this is to make sure that they're well controlled and they don't end up, having to go back into hospital for a readmission, which becomes very costly and has to be carried by the scheme. So it's a sort of multifaceted type of approach that we've done, encouraging members to go for the screenings, to try predict stuff, and then on the back end using new technology that's come out to look at the data and to help predict and ultimately prevent hospital admissions.
Yeah, it's remarkable. I was watching on BBC last night how in the NHS there's been a breakthrough with a chip implant in the eye that's helping individuals read, and just the speed at which this technology that you mentioned is moving is quite something. And I think specifically in healthcare, it offers huge benefits. And we've got AI, genomics, as personalized medicine. You can do virtual consults with your doctors now. Really exciting. If you could leave members and viewers with one takeaway from the 2026 launch, Kevin, what would it be?
I would say that for our members, they should really be assured that they're in very good hands. I mean, if you look at our benefits, they're probably the best value for money in the market. They're simple to understand. Medshield is a medical scheme that's prided itself on a traditional type of option. What you see is what you get. I've mentioned many times in this interview our financial strength, our solvency. So, there's no risk at all to the members. Our strategy, as you said, is not to go with very high and very low contribution increases, to keep it constant so that members can sort of predict as well and expect what they can get the following year. They're not going to get a nasty shock. And, we're really trying to give back a lot more value to our members. We did it this year. We increased day-to-day benefits. We reduced co-payments. We introduced additional screenings, as we spoke about. And we limited the contribution increase to very competitive levels. And I think that, that's sort of what people want from a medical scheme. They want better benefits. They want the claims to be paid. They want to know that the scheme is not going to run into financial health, and they want to know that contribution increases are going to be kept to affordable levels. And I think that Medshield has ticked the box on all of those three. And as I say, if we're able to be successful in the next 2 to 3 years in terms of penetrating that corporate market, I think you're going to see the scheme, really accelerate exponentially. And we could then really look at actually maybe CPI contribution increases for the foreseeable future.
Well, that really will feed into that partner for life tagline, which just demonstrates that it's beyond just a marketing strategy. It really is a core part of what Medshield stands for. Kevin, Aron, thank you very much, Principal Officer at Medshield Medical Scheme, for sharing how the 2026 product suite is evolving to meet all of those challenges and members' changing health needs, from predicting to preventing illness while keeping costs as contained as possible. Lots of moving parts to manage, but I think it's fair to say that the scheme is scoring an A+ on most fronts. Thanks for joining us here on Business Talk.
Thanks, Michael.